From Global, leading Britain's conversation, The Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald. Well, you have been busy, haven't you? Trump's second overseas trip, and there he was today in Warsaw, giving a big speech, open-air speech, tens of thousands of cheering Poles in the streets, unlike the demonstrations he gets in many other countries. And it was a speech today about values, about his values, about Western values, about the way he sees the future of the West. He had, in the middle of it all, a fairly big dig at the European Union by talking about the steady creep of government bureaucracy that drains the vitality and wealth of the people. I'm sure Mrs. Merkel would have been sucking on lemons at that point. He also had a bit of a go at Russia. He said that he felt that Putin had destabilised the Ukraine and indeed Syria and other places, and that, of course, ahead of the first meeting between Trump and Putin, which takes place tomorrow and is scheduled to last for an hour. But the really big part of his speech was where he talked about the need to protect our borders, to preserve our civilization in the face of those who would subvert and destroy it. He talked about Poland's Christian values, about its battles for independence. He talked, in many ways, it was a speech that could have been given by a European Eurosceptic. The belief in nation-state, the belief in pride in community, but above all, his belief that our values are increasingly endangered by terrorism and extremism. He said the fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Tell me, do you think that the West has the will to survive? And are we really determined enough, our governments and our leaders, to defeat terrorism and extremism? To get involved in this, please call me on 0345 6060 973, text me on 84850, tweet me on @LBC, not forgetting the hashtag Farage and LBC, and you can watch the show live by going to LBC's Facebook page now. So, come on, tell me, is Trump right? Do we need to defend nations? Do we need to defend borders? Do we need to defend our Christian values? Because if we don't, is he right that actually the whole thing is under threat? Is that a wild exaggeration, or is it in fact perhaps the most important message that we should be debating at this time through which we're living? Martin in Tottenham, good evening. Is Trump right?
Good evening, Nigel. I agree with him for one of the few things of what he said about Western society being downgraded.
Yes.
We pander too much to minorities, where we let them outspeak the majority. Anyone who criticises anything seen as a, let's say, immigration or anything, they're labelled as a racist, so that we can't have honest conversations about it.
Yes, I have some experience of that, Martin, myself, I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, we have, I think what Ian was saying is neoliberalism, where even, I mean, they can say whatever they want, but anything that we say that counters them, we're labelled and we're shut up because we're not allowed to talk about it. And slowly we're seeing our country being forced more towards where we cater for third world ideas, such as having Sharia laws.
I mean, Martin, do you lay the blame for this at the door of our political class, or is it the liberal media? I mean, who is it that's stopping us from having these conversations?
Well, I'd say it's more liberal-speaking politicians, where even conservatives seem to pander to this neoliberal idea. We don't have a true conservative government anymore. Instead, we have one that flip-flops back and forth, just trying to please everybody, rather than focusing on real issues which affect us and will affect us in the future. If we keep on allowing in, let's say, certain migrant populations that have backwards ideas, and instead of fixing it, we kind of shut people up about it, we're not doing ourselves any favours.
No, Martin, I think I know what you're talking about, and the fact that even you're not talking about it clearly shows that we have a slight problem with this conversation. And I thought what was interesting was when Trump talked about Poles reasserting their identity as a nation devoted to God. Do you think he's overplaying the Christian significance of this?
I have noticed on the right that they do keep talking a bit too much about Christianity, but at least certain Christian values mean that you could, I don't know, protecting certain Christian values is what made...
Yep. Martin, wherever you were, you've gone. Martin's gone. He's been censored. Somebody's cut his phone line. I'm sure he's going to say that when he rings back in a moment. I get on Twitter. Yes, he's spot on. The future of the West is at risk every day. And I get, he mentioned the bureaucracies harming us from within. That too is a real problem. Well, he was having a direct pop, I think, there at the European Union. And, you know, he's met with Merkel this evening. I wonder how that conversation has gone. Alan, from Nass in Northern Ireland, has Trump got this right, or is he over the top?
Well, I think on balance, Nigel, I think Trump is right. I think from the day he announced he was in favour of a nation-state democracy, where people voted and the government then acted on behalf of the people, rather than, and he made this clear, he was self-funding from the beginning. Whereas if you take the EU, the Commission actually makes the laws.
Yep.
They are the people. The people don't realise that they are the sole originator of laws within the EU. Now, they can't deal with health, defence, or education, but all of the other laws are made by unelected officials that are actually appointed. Many of them have never held elected office at all, and the idea of nation-state democracy is so important because it gives the idea of citizenship, that people have rights and that they not only those rights got to be protected, but that they should actually, I don't want to say come first, but that their interests have got to be looked after by the people.
Well, Alan, I obviously agree with that, Alan, but given how powerful the Commission are, and you're quite right, they really are, you know, do you think the Commission, the European Commission, has got the will to defeat terrorism and extremism?
I think the Commission has a very cynical view of this. I think the Commission has been, the reason that they're appointed rather than elected is because they are there to instigate a globalist agenda where trade trumps, literally, I hate about the pun, they trump the actual electoral system and the voter. And that the primary thing that they are interested in is the single market, where you're basically using trade as that is the number one currency for them. And then the corporations, which Trump brilliantly pointed out, borders are important for this reason, Nigel. You have to have a jurisdiction. You can't have laws that can be implemented unless you have a jurisdiction, and you can't have a jurisdiction without borders. And what do the corporations do? They outsource the jobs, or they bring in people. They say to you, well, if you're not prepared to work for this amount of money, we'll actually import labour.
Which is what they do.
Then they pay their taxes anywhere else but the parts of the country that they're actually in, such as Apple, 2.5% in Ireland. And then, when they're finished with that, the CEOs pay themselves. They're outsourcing the jobs or outsourcing the plants, and then outsourcing the tax liability for schools, hospitals, etc. They then pay themselves a massive pay rise. And Trump. Well, he of course,
Alan, famously is talking about an America First policy. But it's interesting. It's not an isolationist policy because he's actually busy now travelling around the world. But I think what Trump's really saying to us, Alan, is that what you've done in Europe is you've given power away to unelected bureaucracy, something that the argument you've made in your phone call tonight. And when it comes to the West having the will and the ways to defeat terrorism, extremism, what he's really saying is that Mr. Juncker, aided and abetted by Mrs. Merkel, opened the doors to uncontrolled migration across the Mediterranean, which Trump believes will lead to a direct threat to our civilization. Alan, I thank you for pointing out clearly the powers of the European Commission. Dina in Maida Vale.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening. So, is Trump on the right tack with this, or is it a bit over the top?
No, I think what's happening is that President Trump is reasserting himself as the world's religious leader.
Religious leader?
Yes, I do, yes. I mean, he's been to Saudi Arabia, where he got a wonderful welcome. He then went to Israel, then he went to visit the Pope, and now he's gone to a very Catholic country. Because, of course, his wife is Roman Catholic.
She is, yeah.
Yes, and I think he's begun to realise how little respect he has for politics and how he's up against the wall with people he's got no respect for, and he's not going to take it lying down. So I think he's going to go to all the religious countries where he can have a real debate about what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to work together to create a much more fundamentalist religious environment again?
You know, Dina, it's interesting because a couple of years ago, if you'd asked me about Trump, I would have said, by American political standards, he was a more secular than a religious figure. You know, very often, particularly in the Republican Party, you know, God comes into almost every speech they give. It didn't used to with Trump, and yet, and I was there at his inauguration, and he chose to put his hand on a prayer book that his mother had given him when he was 10 years old. And I think you're right, Dina. He is now talking about Christian values, and he, in many ways, is saying that there needs to be an honest conversation within Islam. As he said to them in Saudi Arabia, drive out of your places of worship those who are doing such great damage. So Dina, I think in many ways you're on the right track. I think he is making religion a big part of his premiership, of his presidency. Are you, Dina, a Trump fan or agnostic?
Well, I don't think it's any way historical like traditional Republican religion.
No.
I think it's much more that he's found himself in the White House, up against the wall, not able just to get in a car and go out and get pizza or something. And I think he's lain there at night not being able to sleep, but having been cornered. And he's had like some kind of a mini breakdown or breakthrough or Damascus experience where suddenly he realises
something's happened.
Something's happened.
Yes, no, I agree with that.
I don't think it's necessarily bad.
No, something has happened. Dina, thank you for your call. Chris on Facebook says, people who talk about Christian values don't seem to understand it at all, so that counterbalances the point that Dina made. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:15. As protesters clash in Hamburg with riot police ahead of the big G20 summit that'll take place there tomorrow, where, amongst other things, Donald Trump will, of course, meet Vladimir Putin for the first time and spend an hour with him. He'll also, of course, spend time with Britain's Theresa May as well. But earlier on, he was in Warsaw, speaking in an open square to tens of thousands of cheering Poles and saying to them that the West doesn't seem to have the will to stand up to defeat terrorism and extremism, and that if it doesn't, our whole civilization is actually under threat. And whilst all that was going on, I was sitting in a seat at Lord's, watching the first day of the Test season with a new captain, Joe Root, against South Africa. And at the end of the day's play, the England captain on debut is 184 not out. So let's cheer a bit of sporting success for this country, at least on day one. Anyway, back to Trump. And Tina from St Albans says, "Hi Nigel, Trump is right. We will lose our hard-won rights and freedoms in the West if we give away our border controls. Trump is right. The West is under threat from greed and ultra-liberalism," says Chris. Well, I'm sure there must be some of you out there that think Trump is completely and utterly wrong. Although I get one here. Trump is right for once. Western civilization is the greatest empowering force for advancing mankind. Aggie in Slough, good evening to you. What did you make?
Good evening, Nigel. I'm a bit nervous. Second-time caller. How are you?
Well, don't be nervous. We're just going to have a chat. Aggie, I'm fine. So what did you make of his performance in Warsaw today?
Well, I'm not sure if you can tell from my accent. I'm Polish-British. I've lived in this country for nearly 2 decades, so EU had nothing to do with it.
Right.
And I've applied for British citizenship, and I have dual citizenship now, and I'm really proud of it.
Good for you.
What I've noticed, I'll tell you why I'm saying this. What I've noticed is that I speak to some people who were born here, and I wouldn't say they're ashamed, but they're not really proud of who they are. People don't want to put their flags up and things like that. And Poland is really proud country, and I think Donald Trump was playing to that sentiment.
Yes,
I don't always agree with him, but I think on this occasion, he was right. He was saying, don't dilute your traditions, Well,
it's very interesting, Aggie, because okay, we voted for Brexit.
Yeah.
And everyone in Brussels tells me, you're just a stupid island. All the rest of us are going to carry on with our European project. And it's really interesting that what we're now seeing from Hungary, from the Czech Republic, from Slovakia, and from Poland.
And Poland, yeah.
4 countries that have lived, are used to have lived under foreign empires, whether it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, whether it was Nazi occupation, whether it was the Soviet Union occupation, countries that weren't allowed to be themselves for many, many years. And since 1990, they've become nations again. And you're right, Aggie, people, they are enormously proud of who they are. There is a profound sense of nationhood and identity. And you're right, in many ways, the Trump message was always going to go down a storm in Warsaw. And I would say this, if anything, is going to completely break up the European Union. It is those 4 countries saying to Mr. Juncker, saying to Mrs. Merkel, we will not accept your migrant quotas. We want to keep our countries as they are. And Aggie, I think that's the position they're on now, but I think they're going to stick to that, don't you?
Do you think they're going to be punished for it?
Well, I mean, they could be. The European Union could withhold money. It could have a court ruling to say they breached the spirit of solidarity in the treaties or whatever it is. But you know something? I don't think they care. I mean, Andrew Marr, the political commentator, said that the prime ministers of those 4 countries, when they speak on this subject, make Nigel Farage sound like a Foreign Office diplomat. And you know, it's absolutely right. So Aggie, you felt today Trump was striking the right note, yeah?
Yeah, I often disagree with him, I must say. But on this occasion, he knew exactly what to say. He was really prepared for this one, I have to say. Good speech.
Yeah. Good, Aggie, thank you. Great call. Call again, please. Thank you. I get here. Come on, Nigel. What is a Christian value? Well, our Christian society, and the way that it's developed, is one where everybody is equal before the law, and that includes women. Because I think, and if you look at Trump's speech today, he made a very great play on the fact that women now had equality in society. And what he was saying is that if we have uncontrolled immigration from some parts of the world, the role of women will effectively be downplayed. I think he's actually right. If you think I'm barking up the wrong tree and that Trump is absolutely stone crazy, then call me on 0345 6060 973. Redwan from Hounslow, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel. I just wanted to kind of say, I think we need to take a step back here and actually look at, what he's suggesting and actually look at the reality. So, is Western civilization really under threat? I mean, by extremism, terrorism, uncontrolled immigration. I mean, let's take a step back and see exactly, what is, ruining, Western civilization. What is actually impacting on most of the people's lives? And if he was to, go door to door and ask all Westerners, what is the main thing that's on top of your agenda, right? What's something that what's one thing in society that you'd like to change, right? I'm pretty sure that most people won't say that they've been impacted by extremism or by uncontrolled immigration, right? And to say a statement like that, I think it's scaremongering, and this is a tactic that's obviously been used by many years, by politicians to forego certain laws or to kind of establish some.
Are you suggesting, Redwan?
Scaremongering society. But
are you suggesting? Are you suggesting that there is not a growing fear of terrorism in this country?
That's not what I said. But if you look at his statement, Western civilization is under threat, under risk. I mean, those are very two different things, right? And to say that, you asked the question, is it exaggeration? I believe absolutely it's an exaggeration.
Okay, fine.
And I really don't believe that.
But are we right to be concerned?
Absolutely right to be concerned, and I as a Muslim, I work very hard in my own community to, bring this to the fore, the thing about extremism and taking away or looking and seeing where radicalization is coming from, working with the youth to actually, instill in them the proper teachings of Islam, which actually takes them away from this extremist mentality. So
and that, of course, Redwan, is what he was saying in Riyadh, wasn't it? I mean, it was interesting, I thought, that his first overseas speech was in what one might have thought was hostile territory. 50 of the greatest Muslim leaders of the world in that room, and he says, I want to work with the good guys, but you've got to work with us to get rid of the bad guys. So we're not too far apart on this, are we?
No, fair enough. But I think what I fear this is gonna, the repercussions of this statement is that you get all of the unfortunate right wingers coming up and saying, yeah, absolutely, this is if Donald Trump is now saying, the world leader is now saying that we have a right to be scared and our civilization is under threat, then that's just going to increase even more hostility between people of other faiths with those right wingers that want to sell an agenda in this society.
But equally, we do have to act, don't we? I mean, when you saw those figures that came out from a German government agency admitting there are now perhaps as many as 24,000 people living in Germany, who they're worried could be either terrorists or linked in some way closely to terrorists or terrorism, and that many of them have come in over the course of the last 2 years pretending to be refugees. There is a problem here, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to dispute those figures, right? But what I'm saying is going back and saying, is this the number one thing that's, putting this civilization, our Western way of life, under threat? And the answer is no. And actually the answer, I think you alluded to one of your someone who sent something in earlier about, greed, about corruption. These things have a massive impact on our daily lives, the way we work, you mentioned before about women in society. I mean, it's a fact that even within my own faith, Muslim women have a massive problem in the UK in getting jobs, in getting equal opportunities to actually work in higher promotion and higher higher roles where actually they've got the skills, but unfortunately they're not being given the opportunity. Right?
Okay.
And there's something going on there, and this is impacting a lot of people's lives. Now, there's so many things that he could have mentioned that's impacting people's lives, but to mention something that, to be honest, for a lot of people, it's very low down the list of what they would deem as impacting their way of life or undermining the Western civilization.
Well,
as we know it.
I wouldn't underestimate the concern that people have for what may come in the future. I mean, we have seen, and they may be isolated incidents, they may be one or two people, mostly are not big grand plots, but we have seen such a huge rise in the number of terrorist incidents that have taken place over the course of the last couple of years, Redwan, that people are worried, they are concerned. But I take your point. You think Trump is exaggerating and using fear, and I respect the point of view that you make. Russia also has very Christian values. Let's join up and resist global capitalism, says Don in Herne Hill. Nigel, I think he's definitely right. He is one of the few leaders that speaks the language of ordinary people. We are not allowed to say what we think anymore without being labelled, and that comes from Shirley. You're listening to The Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30. Well, Donald Trump has been stirring it up today in Warsaw, and I've no doubt he'll do much the same thing in Hamburg tomorrow at the big G20 summit. And what he's saying is that he really doubts whether the leaders of the West have got the will to stand up to defeat terrorism and extremism, and that our civilization is under threat. And I'm asking you, is he right to say that? Some of you think he's absolutely right to say that. Others think it's a bit of an exaggeration. Also going on in Europe today, there have been a lot of talk about trade going on in Brussels, and a statement coming out of the European Commission that they're preparing to have a trade deal with Japan, which would be a deal where there'd be no tariffs if, for trade that took place between Japan and the European Union. Whoopee, I say. The Swiss have had one of these deals with Japan for years and years and years. And yet, on the very same day, they're saying, look how wonderful we are. Monsieur Barnier, the chief negotiator of Brexit, told an EU committee in Brussels that there would not be frictionless trade between the EU and the European and the United Kingdom post-Brexit. He said there would be negative consequences to Brexit. So it's okay for the EU to have a free trade deal with Japan, but they don't want to have, apparently, a free trade deal with their biggest export market in the world. It all makes sense, doesn't it? All I would say to you is, don't panic. This is all part of a negotiating position. And what we've got to do as a country is keep pushing the case for economic logic that there are car workers in Bavaria, wine producers in France, chocolate makers in Belgium who desperately want us to have a proper trade deal. But I found today what was going on there really, really contradictory. Now, we're going back to Trump. Is he right? Is he wrong? Has he over-exaggerated? Is the West, is our way of life threatened by open borders and by a lack of will to defeat terrorism and extremism? Steve in Northampton is my next caller. Good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
Hi.
I'd like to say that I totally disagree with the comments he made today in Poland.
Uh-huh.
I think it's a total fabrication, to be honest. And it's reminiscent of the weapons of mass destruction or destruction. That's similar to that. It reminds me of that. You know, everybody's a threat. I don't see why is Putin such a threat?
Well,
in terms of going into Syria, wasn't he was trying to get rid of ISIS, wasn't he? I think, Steve, that the comments that Trump made today about Russia will surprise many Trump supporters, because I was all for Trump before he got voted in.
Yeah.
When I followed his campaign and I was listening to yourself and Trump, I thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. George Orr, not war, this sort of thing. And then as soon as he's got in, he's let their missiles off, these so-called chemical attacks that Syria was meant to have carried out on their own people. He retaliated with the missile attacks. I couldn't believe that. I thought, what's happened to this diplomatic, sort of like peaceful Trump? All of a sudden, it seems to have changed. And I find it quite sort of a bit worrying. I don't buy this sort of like big threat thing. I don't buy it one little bit. I think it's fabricated. He's trying to drum up support for something bigger. That's how I see it.
Well, you may be right. I mean, Steve, I think, you're not alone. A lot of Trump supporters would say that he's stuck 100% to everything he said in the campaign, apart from this issue. Now, don't forget, he's meeting Putin tomorrow. He's written a book, The Art of the Deal, and it could be that he's saying things like this today because he wants to emerge from the meeting tomorrow to say, do you know what? We've met. We've spent an hour together. We've found some common ground. So I just wonder, Steve, whether what was said today, whether that was perhaps a part of it. I don't know, but it could have been. But on the other point, Steve, the big point about open borders, about really questioning whether the West has the will.
I don't agree with the open border policy. It's farcical. I've never seen immigration like that. It's on a biblical proportion. I mean, how come that amount of people were let to travel all the way across Europe? I've worked with Afghanistanis, right? They walked across 9 countries. It took them a year to get here. I'm a brickie. They're labourers working here.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe what I'm hearing. I've worked with so many different nationalities this year. It's unbelievable. I'm not faulting them. I'm faulting how it's all been instigated. It seems very strange to me how they can, the powers that be can let something like that take place. And I wonder why. And I question it all.
Do you think, Steve, do you think that our way of life, our values, are potentially under threat from terrorism and extremism?
Well, I'll say one thing. Before we invaded Iraq, I don't think ISIS and ISIL, so the likes of these, existed, or they did.
Well, they did, but not.
But they wasn't coming over here and carrying out cell attacks like in small pods like they're doing now, were they?
No, that is true. So what you're saying is that our military interventionism, by doing this, we basically made life worse for ourselves.
Yeah, to sum it up simply.
Yeah. No, I understand that. Steve, thank you for the call. Interesting. There are quite a few people who were pro-Trump who are worried about this line on Russia, and that was Steve's big takeout from a speech in Warsaw today. Western civilization, led by the US, is the safeguard for liberty and freedom, says Jesse on Twitter. The sooner we distance our country from the USA, the better it's going to be. Trump is a nutcase, says Ada from Purfleet. Well, he certainly excites emotions on both sides of this debate. OK, Anthony in Battersea, do you think that Trump got it right today, or was he over the top?
Hiya, Nigel. Can you hear me?
I certainly can.
Hiya. I think he's definitely got it right in the fact that Western civilization is under threat from terrorism. But you can't just generalise this certain area to terrorism, where the whole world, we see it in our everyday lives. We've seen what's happened to London and Manchester, terrorism that happens. It happens everywhere, and you can't just dignify it. Like, you can't just say Western civilization is under threat from terrorism, because he's such a big figure that if he's going to talk about terrorism, he needs to talk about the risk to everyone around the world. He's made all the right calls about terrorism, speaking about the UK government that came back after the terrorist threat, saying that there's nothing wrong, we shouldn't fear anything, where we really should, because this terrorism, it's serious, and he's the only person in politics today that actually speaks about it. Truly.
Yes, he is. Oh, no, yes, he is. I mean, Anthony, he was giving this talk in the context. He was using, in a sense, the West. When he used that today, he meant Europe and America. That's really what he was talking about. Yep. And I think, to be honest, Anthony, he was having a mega dig at the concept of European Union, wasn't he? He talked about bureaucracy, what it does to us, but he was making the point that nations need to be strong, nations like Poland need to be proud, and they need to have their values. That, Anthony, was the message today, really, wasn't it? And some would call it nationalism. And some would say that's a bad thing, and some would say, actually, it's rather a good thing. What do you think?
Of course, but terrorism's global. We need to be coming together with other countries. Well, I understand the whole concept of Brexit, and I believe that it was the right call leaving. And I support you on your movement in it and everything that happened. But I think we should be more coming together with countries that actually are coming out telling us we want to tackle these threats in other countries. Like ISIS are doing such a big threat at the moment that we need to be coming together with other countries that want to fight them, whether they be in Europe or not, other continents, all these other different things.
Could NATO, Anthony, could NATO play a role in this, do you think?
You put me on the spot there. I'm not really sure, but I definitely think... you've definitely put me in.
All I'm saying is this, Anthony. He was saying, in really loud, clear terms, we in America want to be your allies through NATO to defend against threats. And threats can come in all sorts of forms. Threats can come in terms of people who want to bomb us or invade us. But equally, ISIS is in many ways a common threat to all the members of NATO. And it was very interesting that he was praising Poland because they are paying their way. They are paying the 2% membership fee that the rules of the club say. And a lot of people, Anthony, in the rest of Europe aren't paying their way. And I think he was also having a fairly big dig there too. Look at Poland. They're a proud independent country. They pay their way in NATO. And look at most of the Northern European countries who simply aren't doing it. But Anthony, I take your point. He's one of the few global leaders who even dares to talk about it. Michael in Peterborough. Marks out of 10 for Donald Trump today.
I'm sorry, I can't, Nigel. I can't give you a mark out of 10. Can I just make a couple of comments?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So for most of the time, Donald Trump is completely incomprehensible and banal. He hasn't got an intellectual contribution to make to the world stage, I don't think. And I think he's using, this sort of language to have to say something because he has got nothing positive or no contribution to make to the world, as I've said. So. I think I would ignore what he's got to say, and eventually we'll all forget about him.
Well, Michael, I'm going to disagree with that point, because what he said in Riyadh was utterly comprehensible. It was that the Muslim world and the West need to work together to fight against extremism. That was pretty simple and clear, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that is true. And, of course, extremism has lots of forms, lots of different cohorts of people that you can call extremists. But I still think, well, what do you do with that information? What do you do with those comments? I mean, you've got to look at the sources of these issues. And somebody else commented earlier about, us interfering in other countries' business, of going in there, creating a vacuum, and all those. They're all real things that have happened.
No, I know, but what he was saying was we don't want the Saudis funding extremism in our country. We want them actually to be driving out those sources, and I think he was pretty clear. Michael, I'm going to have to let you go at that point. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's 7:45. Donald Trump questions the ability of Western leaders, whether they've really got the will to defeat terrorism and extremism, and saying if they don't, basically our civilization could be under threat. And I'm asking, do you agree, or is this simply over the top. And Claudia is calling in from Tuscany in Italy. Claudia, what do you think?
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
Good evening. I'm fine.
Good evening. Hi. Look, I have two things to say to you this evening. One is that I've lived away from England. I'm English. I grew up in England. I left England in '83.
Uh-huh.
And I've noticed when I go back to England that something really sad has happened to the English, is that they are apologetic about our culture. It's not, I have nothing against any immigrants or anything. I think it's great. But I think the English have got to stop apologising and start being proud of their culture and upholding their culture a lot more. That is what I've noticed. So that,
in a way, Trump was holding up Poland, wasn't he, today, as an example of that. He said, you are a proud people, you're proud of your country, your religion, your values, and he was really saying the whole of the West needs to be like that. So I guess, maybe that's why he chose Warsaw to give this speech.
I don't know. I personally would never have voted for Trump, but he was put in democratically, and I believe in democracy. However, my second point to you is that I became really disappointed and disillusioned with Donald Trump when the first thing he did when he went on his overseas trip was to go to Saudi Arabia and make an arms deal with them for billions. And I don't find what he's saying tonight very coherent with that. I mean, we all don't really know what's going on in the Middle East and who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
No, I know that. I
have no idea, but I don't like the special treatment that everybody's giving Saudi Arabia. I would not want to be a woman in Saudi Arabia, believe me.
No, quite.
And I don't see why Donald Trump, on his first overseas trip, makes a huge billion arms deal with them, selling arms to them, brokered by his son-in-law, which I didn't particularly like either. And now, on his next overseas trip, he's telling us all we've got to fight terrorism. It just doesn't... I mean, you explain to me, Nigel. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, Claudia, I do understand that concern. And don't forget that it's the same with the British government. We're very keen to do business with Saudi Arabia too. I guess Trump would say this: I was elected, number one, to bring jobs back in manufacturing in America, and number two, to fight terrorism. And he would argue the two are not inconsistent. But I do understand the way you feel about this. I mean, he did the deal, yes, but he also did actually challenge Muslim leaders in Saudi Arabia in a way that no Western leader has ever done before. Did he not?
I don't agree really with that. I think that he shouldn't have been selling arms to them.
All right.
Full stop. That's my humble opinion.
No, fine. No, I don't. Look, there are many people, Claudia, in this country who are disquieted about the trade we do with Saudi Arabia, and indeed, it wasn't long after that Saudi trip that everybody decided that actually Qatar are the bad uns. They're the guys that have to be isolated. But you're quite right. Picking the good guys and the bad guys in the Middle East is very, very difficult, and it's the main reason why I was so against the British getting involved in the conflict in Syria. Assad is the bad guy, the rebels are the good guys, and then it turns out that the rebels have amongst them lots of people who are part of, ISIS or groups that are linked to it. So picking good uns, picking bad uns, it really is a very difficult thing. Claudia, thank you ever so much for your call. I'm going to ask Anthony and Friar Barnet, is Trump right or wrong, good guy or bad guy today?
Oh, good evening, Nigel.
Good evening.
Trump's absolutely spot on.
Yep.
Never a truer word said.
Right.
I think the levels of migrants coming into this country and Europe is extremely worrying. The levels of recent terrorism in this country and throughout. And I think he's absolutely right to attack the right. And I think that's where the worry is for me. I think it's from the right. And I think, let's put things into perspective here. He's the most divisive, president in some years. I think he's the most divisive leader we've got in the Western world.
Right.
That we've had for some time. And I think what has happened in politics of recent is it's quite binary. You're either to the left or you're to the right. Or in Donald Trump's case, and perhaps yours, Nigel, you're kind of far to the right. And I think that in his position...
Surely you can do better than this, Anthony, can't you? I mean, please, really. You know, honestly. Well, you know, maybe it's easy to put labels on people, but I mean, honestly, you know, the last time someone called me that was many, many years ago. I thought we'd all grown up and moved on.
Well, I have grown up, Nigel, but I think you have to understand the world that we're in. And what this is doing, it's polarising people, and it's actually forcing people to take a position.
All right. Anthony, let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
Right, or it's to the left, or in some cases, it's to the extreme right.
Do you, yeah, or extreme left. It's boring. Anthony, let me ask you a question. Do you think the West potentially faces a real problem and a real threat from Islamic terrorism?
No, I don't.
Thank you very much, Anthony. That's lovely. End of the call. Anthony thinks we face no threat at all from Islamic terrorism. That is his view, which is probably why he wants to throw silly labels at other people. Now, earlier this week, we spoke and talked at length about the case of 10-month-old Charlie Gard, and we thought it was a remarkable thing that the Pope and even the President of the USA, Donald Trump, had got themselves involved in this case. And the vast majority of you, through your tweets and texts and phone calls, very much agreed with my view on this, which is that the state should not have this power, that if Charlie's parents want to take that boy to the USA to have one last shot at being able to help him, they should be free to do so. And we had a very powerful and very strong debate on it. Now, joining me now is Maria Tatalovic. She's a close family friend, and she's been at Charlie's bedside on a daily basis. Maria, good evening, and thank you very much for coming in.
Good evening, Nigel.
Now, it's been reported that the life support machine for Charlie will be switched off tomorrow. Is this what you're expecting?
Yes, this is the latest information that I understand has been given, and that is the expectation, that the ventilation, the life support machines will be switched off tomorrow morning. We are in the home stretch, really, of fighting to have Charlie released from this hospital and transferred into the care of doctors willing to treat him, preeminent doctors willing to care for him and treat him for the condition that he is suffering from.
So I'm guessing that Connie, his mother, must be absolutely beside herself right now.
Absolutely. I'm also a mother, and for me, the reason why I feel so strongly about this, in addition to being Connie's friend and having seen Charlie every day for the last 2 months, at least a couple of hours a day, is that whose child is Charlie, as you have rightly said.
Chris and Connie want to go to America to do this, and the British courts are stopping this from happening.
And they have the money to pay for it, and there is no prohibition legally in the order for the baby to be transferred to the United States or anywhere. So he's being held against their will in the hospital without judicial backing to justify this.
And politics aside, Maria,
yes.
Was Donald Trump's statement in all of this useful, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, we have the support of the President of the United States of America. He is a grandfather. He is a father. From a parental perspective, from a pro-choice perspective, and Connie and Chris were, I mean, their whole family, Connie's mom and dad, took it very personally and in a very positive way, that he actually took the time, the moments to tweet about their child, and they were very proud of that, and they were very grateful for his involvement.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, Nigel, Charlie is so stable. He is thriving. He is growing. We've never had any emergencies. We've never had any issues with organ failure. He's only on air. He does not even need to be fed or pumped with oxygen. He's only on a feeding tube. He's lying on a normal bed. He's not in an incubator. He's accessible to us all. We touch him. We hold his hands. I massage him because they move him around. So he's a living being. He does not deserve to die.
Is there anything that can be done, in your view, at this late stage?
Gosh has a choice. They are not obliged to terminate life. They are not permitted to terminate life. The order allows them to withdraw ventilation, but they are not allowed to deny access to this baby by doctors who are willing to maintain him alive and provide treatment. Therefore, if Gosh should decide to take the right decision, in my opinion, They can. It can be varied. It can be agreed.
And has the Prime Minister involved herself in this case at all?
My understanding is that she has expressed put forward a statement. The most important part of it, in my opinion, is the fact that she has mentioned the possibility that new information, should it be provided, would be taken into consideration. I would certainly hope that Gosh would do that.
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if they did not, which is something that they've done in the past. They have disregarded the opinion, support, and willingness to treat by doctors who are possibly better than them and more experienced.
Well, there is a meeting.
This.
There is a meeting tomorrow, of course.
Yes,
between Theresa May and Donald Trump.
Indeed,
they're going to meet in Hamburg tomorrow, and I think perhaps, Maria, what we need to do here, you and I together, is we need to urge President Trump to talk to the British Prime Minister and say, talk to this committee of doctors and try and give little Charlie one last chance. So go on, give President Trump a message, and I'll make sure he hears it.
President Trump, I never thought I would actually direct a message to you, but please save this baby. We just need him to be released, transferred, and receive treatment which will be paid for. We are not asking for anyone to treat that doesn't want to. We don't want to force anyone. It's about choice. It's about parental rights. It's about human rights. And it's about the right to life for this baby who deserves it.
Maria, thank you. That was beautifully spoken.
Thank you so much, Nigel.
And our thoughts are with the family, you, the friends. Thank you very much indeed. Well, that's all from me this week. I'll be back on Monday at 7 o'clock. Coming up at